camera here. But hey, first of all, thank you very much. It's my first time actually following Pavarotti. So this is I'm a unbelievable singer, so hopefully I can entertain you just as much. My talk here is just on leadership. So as George mentioned, I did 33 years in the military, commissioned in 1989 out of Northeastern University. Always wanted to be in the military and loved it. And now that I'm out of the Army, so the disclaimer is I don't represent the official views of the United States Army, but I definitely learned a lot from them. So
does anyone recognize what's behind me? What that scene is? Where's all the history kids? Old North Bridge, a shot heard around the world, right? 1775. So I like always starting out with that. Next slide, please. So really simple agenda. I only have 10 slides and we're on number 2 already, which is good. So I'm going to talk for about 25 minutes, but really to engage and hopefully ask questions. If I say anything that you don't understand or say something, please call me out, because the only reason I got to be a general, I made a lot of mistakes, and you learn from those mistakes and you get better on it. So about me. So a son of an immigrant. My mom came from Ireland in 1946 at 18 years old. She followed my aunt, my godmother. She came in 1945. She really loves America, and I can understand being a first-generation American, how the love of this country, and especially a lot of people here. And one thing I always want to start off before I begin, I know George is a veteran. Do we have any other veterans that serve in the military here? Just you and me, George? Okay, that's okay. Let me ask you this. Does anyone have mom, dad, grandparents, son, daughter, cousin, anybody that's in the military? Thank you. Thank you. Because what we do, we can't do without the love and support of family and friends. So always wanted to be in the Army. My mom says, you're going to go to college. So I found this thing called ROTC, Reserve Officer Training Corps. That's how I got my commission. She worked for 19 years as a domestic servant before she met my dad. And they made up in plenty of time because she had me, my sister, and my brother all 1 year apart, all born in December. So my sister and brother, if you know, are the Irish twins, all born within 12 months. So I'm going to talk about how the Army does leadership, and I'll keep moving so I don't mess anybody up here, so you can see that. So when I talk about how the Army does leadership, I'm just going to hit the wave tops. So it's a lot of information, but again, just to tell you how it does it. The biggest thing is my personal experiences, what I observed, and this is my thoughts on leadership. And the last thing is conclusion, questions, and discussion. And my goal, as every goal I do, is hopefully you learn something, because right now you're giving me your most valuable gift. That's a gift of time. That's something you give, you can never get back. So I do appreciate that. Hopefully I keep you engaged, and pleasure to be here. So next slide. Okay, this is how the Army defines leadership, you know? And if when I taught leadership at UMass to cadets, but it's also was out through the university, I spoke to a lot of college kids, and I used to start off very simply. It's like, what is leadership? And I said, well, think of somebody that you respect in your life. Could be a coach, could be a mom, dad, somebody that you really look up to and respect. And then you contrast with that with somebody you don't, you know? And what's the difference? It's leadership, if you think about it, because that person, whoever that person you have in your mind that you respect a lot, gives you that purpose, gave you that direction, and motivated you to achieve that. And it doesn't mean you have to have, you like that, so you don't have to like that person, because I never liked my fluids instructor, Hamid Magalchi. I remember that. He's a dean of Northeastern now, but he beat us because he knew what was right. He knew, it also motivated us to be better, because in leadership, as leaders do, it's all about teaching, coaching, and mentoring. You know, those great dancers out there, they didn't get that way. They have raw talent, and with great drive from the parents and motivation and from their instructors, they got as good as they did. And I guess they won the national championship. So congratulations to all the parents out there who was responsible for the beautiful dancers out there. But again, it's that leadership, purpose, motivation, and direction. So we talk about this a lot. Bosses and managers tell, leaders inspire. So when we talk about how do you get people to do things? Well, you get to know them. So how do you get to know people? You take care of your people. Well, you get to understand them, what's their strengths and weaknesses and where they need to get going. You know, a manager can tell you, hey, just get this done. A leader sits down and says, hey, do you understand the task? Do you understand why we're doing that task? And can you do that task? And like, well, I don't know. And this is when that leader says, I bet you can. I know you can. In fact, prove me that you can do that. Or you can take the opposite approach. I don't think you're good enough. This is too hard for you. Oh, no, it's not. Boom. What did you do? You challenge that person. So you're inspiring them to get them to do the right thing. Next slide. if I can sum up anything in my career, that these are the two touchdowns. Leadership is not a position or a title. You know, whatever your title is, you know, leadership is an action or an example. Whatever you do, you know, you can be a leader. Now, I'm a general. I get that. And I knew that. But the reason I'm a general is I took care of my people. I made sure they know, you know, what right looks like. And again, it comes down to character and trust. You know, that person that you respect, why is that? They don't lie, they don't steal, they don't cheat. They'll tell you the truth no matter how hard it is. They're very honest with you, but you know what? You respect them because you trust them. You know, you build up that character of that person, you know, when it comes down to that. Every organization, you have the person in charge, but also you have that informal leadership. You know, I know John's in charge, but really go talk to George. George is his alter ego, or go talk to the executive assistant that says, hey, you know, how's the boss feeling? They understand that. So they have that informal leadership. Everybody has that person in their life. You know, when you have to make a decision, you go to that person and you sit down and say, this is what I need to get done. How do I do it? And they'll give you that guidance, you know, and a true friend will sit you down and tell you, you have an ugly baby, as we say in the military, you know, you're not doing right. You know, even as a general, we have the thing called the sergeant major. I can go to him and say, hey, am I doing something wrong? Call me out on it. And it's like, well, you're the general, you can do no wrong. Like, oh yes, you know, we're all human, you know, we're not infallible. So we have to sit down and say, what am I doing? What am I not doing right? But the other thing, as a leader, I learned, especially young, is that when you follow somebody, you know, everyone has a boss, but when you really appreciate that boss, when you treat him as that leader, they care about you. You know, the old adage, no one cares how much you know until they really know how much you care. And what does that mean? It could be simple as just, hey, how's it going? You know, when I first met George, hey, George, how you doing? This is my wife, Maggie. So in my phone, I write down, hey, George's wife is Maggie, you know? So when I see George, hey, how's Maggie doing? I'm like, wow, you remember. Well, you use those little tricks as a leader. You sit down and you talk. You try to remember people's names. Like I met Kevin and his beautiful bride, Kathleen. I remember that because it's Kathy, because that's my mom's name. So those little things, you know, it's like, wow, they actually took that moment and take a moment. And it sounds so simple, but it really is. Because the most powerful thing is that, wow, he cares about me, you know, or she cares about me. She actually takes a moment because she doesn't look at me as a tool. She actually looks at me as a person, because that's what leadership is. It comes down to people. If you know how to manage people, you can do anything. Okay, next slide. So this is the Army. I'm going to give you 3 slides on how the Army does leadership. And I kind of broke it down at the bottom to use as civilianese. So in the Army, we have 3 levels. Strategic, operational, and tactical. So the strategic, you know, right now, you know, Gloria and all the great people here, they're thinking strategically. They just opened up the Academy, American Academy of Wealth Management. Where do we want to be in 5 years? You know, so in the military, we look at the geopolitical situation. How do we want to be better prepared for the world? How do we want to live in a rules-based order? So a national perspective. So we figure out where we want to go. We put out that vision. So how are we going to get there? So then we look down at the operation. So in the operations, we have those things called campaigns. So what do we need to do? So do we do merger and acquisitions? We have sales targets? We have different markets we want to get into. How do those objectives achieve where we want to go in a vision? So that's the operational. And the tactical is right down where the rubber meets the road. When the soldiers are out there doing their job, they do their task condition and standards. You know, same thing in any type of world, you know, whether you're doing a practice every day, your sales forecast, how do you get, you know, from year to year to make sure you're hitting on those 5 to 10 year objectives to make sure you're completing your vision. In the military, when we do missions, we talk about nesting. You know, this is where we want to go. And everybody down to the rifleman on the ground, that soldier on the ground understands, hey, they don't have to know everything, but they know the general direction where we want to go. We want to grow the company, we want to expand or whatever. But that is all built in the foundations. So when we talk about foundations, that's the Constitution. For the military, it's easy. The United States Constitution, not the USS Constitution, old Ironsides. But we believe in civilian authority over the government. It's in our DNA. You know, you don't want coups. We don't want any of that, because we really believe that the military is subservient to this executive branch of government. Same thing in companies. What values do you have in your companies? And it could be in your own personal life. What are your values? What are your traits? How do you align what you want to do? Because some people work in businesses and they just eat their souls out because they don't believe they're doing it for the money, which is nice. Then you're a mercenary. You're not really doing it because you want to. You're just doing it because you have to. So you try to want to do is work for something and align those foundations. And on the left, attributes and competencies. So next slide. So what are those things in the military? So we call the things called the leadership requirements model. So if you look on the circumference, be, know, and do, right? So those attributes of who you are as a person, and I'll slide over here so you can see that, who you are as a person, character, presence, intellect. That's something everybody has. Now you have different levels of it, obviously. So a young 20-year-old lieutenant is going to be different than a 50-year-old general, but you grow into that. So how do you develop your character? Well, obviously from the foundations, from a good family background, from understanding what right looks like, and then from there, presence. So when you have your presence, we're not talking just physical presence, we're talking military bearing. Do you keep your cool? Can you sit down and be spoken to when you're angry? Or how do you handle stress? As a leader, you can never have a bad day as a leader, because leaders set the tone, both good and bad. And the last thing is intellect. So how do you get better? Like I used to joke with my college students, and especially when you talk to young people, I'm not saying I'm smarter than you. I'm just older and wiser. You can do what you want, but just listen to me, and you try to help them out to make the best decision. So those are the attributes, and we each work on those as you go. Those attributes enable us to do certain things. And in the military, we call them lead, develop, and achieve. So how do we lead? Well, it's very easy. You build trust, you extend influence, and lead by example, and communicate. That's what we ask them to lead. And how good you are at those things comes from your attributes. Do you know how to work with people? Do you know how to handle people? Do you know how to handle certain situations? So again, and then we develop leaders, and also can you achieve? Because you may be great. You can be what we call a great cheerleader, but if you can't cross the finish line, if you can't get that mission, you can't, that's the person everyone likes in the office, but they can't get anything done right. So then, okay, how do we work on that? So again, it's all about the align expectations with the leader development activities and personal management practices and systems. So, character, character, presence, and intellect enables for us to do those things of competency: lead, develop, and achieve. Okay, the next one's going to be an eye chart. Next one here. Don't worry about it. But we take all these things down. We're not going to go through them all, so don't pass out on me here. But again, if you look at the top one, who a leader influences and how leadership is conveyed. Because as a leader, we generate influence. How do we do that? We both do it internally and externally. When we in the military, we call it internally through the chain of command, because I'm in charge, but yet I have people underneath me, and I direct them. I give them that vision. I give them that direction. I give them that purpose and that motivation. And also outside the chain of command, how do we, as a military, work for the civilians? So how do we influence us? Same thing here in the college. How do you influence the outside world to make sure you're going to get to where you want to go? And you have, they usually call stakeholders, On the other side is, how do we convey it? And it's very easy: by word, by action, by relationships. We write it down, we do policy processes, but also it's by example, we do it by action, lead by example. And the last one is just by interpersonal connections. So when you meet people in the world, and as you talk about, and I have met some wonderful people here today, you get to know them and you're like, oh, I know that guy. Seems like a very professional guy. Let me introduce you. And again, that's how I met Gloria through George. So again, it's all about connections. Next slide, please. So here's my personal observations. How did I make it, General? I made a lot of mistakes. The first one, right? In 1989, I commissioned out of Northeastern University. Major Brooks grabbed me. Hey, John, you are very good, but let me give you a piece of advice. Think before you speak. Well, I relearned that one in 1991 because I was sitting in that National Training Center in Irvine, California, and I countermanded my boss. It's saying the wrong thing at the wrong time, and I did it both. And I said something, and I remember Captain Letha and everybody around me, their eyes got wide, because you all been there when someone says something very inappropriate at the wrong time, and they all silver dollar eyes, they all backed up. He stopped the meeting, let everyone go, says, I need to talk to you. And again, as a good leader, praise in public, punish in private. He just chewed me up and down very sternly, but deservingly so. And the good thing I learned from that is that, hey, don't do that again. You never countermand the boss. There's a right way and a wrong way to do things, but it always taught me that. And so when it really was one of the foundation of my leadership. So again, hey, you can disagree with me, but let's do it at the right place, at the right time, in the right circumstances, So number 2, take care of your people and they'll take care of you. It sounds very simple, but again, you get to know your people, and hey, what do they need from you as a leader? They want to feel that they have somebody that they can trust. Comes back to that character and trust. Can they trust you? When you said you're going to do something, do you do it? Very simple. Tough love is still love. But sometimes when people don't do things, you have to be the taskmaster. You're the guy in charge, or you're the gal in charge. You have to be able to say, hey, I know you want to, but you can't. And you have to be fair and consistent. Because what happens in a lot of leadership, sometimes people say, well, I really like George, but I don't like John. And they take care of George and they don't take care of John. Well, then that causes, people see that, like anything in life. You can see when people get favored treatment, and it really just, hurts you, going, hey, this is not good for the team. So again, you have to be fair and consistent. As a leader, you have prerogative. You can say, hey, I'm doing this because John never screws up and George can't get out of his own way every single day of the week. So as a leader, you have that prerogative. The one thing that never discriminates in life, right? Stupidity, right? It affects the general down to the private, affects the CEO down to the line worker, both sides of our political process and stuff. You can't regulate it, and especially when you're a boss and you're leading somebody and you throw your heart and soul into it and someone lets you down. You can't take it personally, because when you sit there, you're like, oh, I just want to choke the living daylights out of that guy. But don't take it. Sit back and always start with heart. It's like, hey, when you sit down with that person, whatever they do, no matter they cheated on a test, they stole from you, find out why. Hey, why did you do that, man? I'm trying to understand the process. And the one thing as I mentioned to a few people over there, my moniker, I'm very kind. I'm a very kind leader, but never confuse kindness with weakness, because when you do, it's going to be a bad day. But when we sit down and have that conversation, because you want to find out, why did they screw up? Why did John do that? Well, my sergeant told me to. So it's not John's problem. It's his intermediate leader. It's his a supervisor. And you find out the supervisor's not teaching the right thing. So you find out, you try to, what we call, peel back that onion. And then you don't take it personally, because all you want to do is fix the problem, and you can assess blame later. Fix the problem, assess blame later, and figure out how do you do that. And the last thing, the one thing also, if one of my soldiers screws up, it's on me, no matter what happens, because I'm the leader. And that's when your employees, that's when your subordinates know that you walk the walk and talk the talk. Walk in there. When I was down at CENTCOM, which is in Tampa, Florida, I was in the Joint Operations Center, and that's when they have Afghanistan, Syria, and Iraq going on. This is in 2018. And I walk in, and the Joint Operations Center, think of a big room with a bunch of TVs and all these radios and all this information flowing in. And they always have an 06, a colonel at the time, always present. So I was 4 on, 4 off, 12 hours a day. And I walk in there and I joke, because it's like I use humor. Humor is good to put people at ease. So I walked in there and said, hey guys, I have 3 things to be here for. And when I was up on stage, you heard me say that today. He goes, number 1, to make everyone here look taller and better looking, Well, that deadpan, you can laugh at that one. See, thank you. Thank you. But again, it puts them at ease. Number 2, to give you all the credit. And number 3, it's all the blame. It's all on me. And they look at me like, yes. That's what our last boss said. Well, something happened. And I called up my boss and said, sir, this didn't happen right. It's on me. I took care of it. And as a leader, that's all you want to know, that somebody took care of it. Okay. You cut me already? I'm just kidding. So there we go. Oh, go back one slide, if I could. If not, we can hit that one next. So take all the credit. So when you're a leader, and the one thing I use for, go back one slide, please. The previous one, and it's the one at the bottom here. The Army, I tell my soldiers, the Army can do a lot of things. As a commander, I can take your time, I can take your pay, and I can take your rank. But the one thing I can never take, and no one can take from you, is your integrity. Only you can give that away. So if you have to lie, you best make it you're saving your buddy's life in combat. It's something. Never give away integrity, because a lot of people give it away cheaply, and they're like, well, I can't lead people. I'm like, well, because they don't believe you. You don't do what you're saying. It sounds so simple, but it's really tough sometimes when your boss is staring at you and you have to take the beating, and you're like, yep, yeah, it's on me, boss. But once you come back to your team and they know they did that for them, they'll go through the wall for you. Like, wow, he actually walks the walk. You make mistakes, failure, adversity, you own it, you learn from it, and you move on. That's all. The easiest thing when you make a mistake, no matter what, hey, I own it, it's on me. This is what I learned from it and move on. As a leader, that's all you want to hear because you have more important things to go forward. But again, some people take it personally. I'm going to get that son of a gun. Hey, relax. You didn't do it on purpose. Don't take it emotionally. There's a lot of emotions. But the other thing is also enforce and maintain the standards and use it as a learning moment. Every situation you have in life, how do you learn from it? Take a deep breath. Try not to get emotional. And trust me, you have emotional intelligence. And it took me a long time to stop swearing when I get upset. But if you talk to my wife, you probably see me behind the computer. But again, you sit down and take it all back in. What can I learn from this situation and move on? Okay, next slide. So we talk about failures. So there's 4 failures that describe any organization. In the military, we have standards. But you walk into any situation, this is something that's applicable to anything, whether you run a lemonade stand all the way up to the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. You got to have standards. Maybe. So if nobody knows what's going on, well, what's the standard? Well, we don't know. Well, that's an organizational failure. Nobody sat back and said, hey, here's what we do, and this is how we do it. Oh, so the next thing is just because you have standards doesn't mean people follow them. They have to be trained on them. So how do you train people? Hey, well, this is what we want to have done. Here's what we want to do. Does everyone understand it? Yes, yes, yes. So they all understand it, but all of a sudden something is still not getting done. Why isn't it? Because of leaders, the president may know what he's doing, but that line manager is like, yeah, I really don't want to, I don't believe the president. I don't think it's the right thing to do. And again, you sit back and say, why isn't it happening? As you see down there, if the leaders are not doing it, it's a leadership failure. And then you sit down with that leader, why aren't you doing it? Well, I think there's a better way. I'm like, well, tell me about the better way. Just don't not do it. You keep doing it until we change the course of action, but we got to get the job done. And the last one is individual failure. So we have standards. We trained on the standards. The individual, the leaders are enforcing those standards, and that individual can't do the job or not doing the job. And you got to find out, okay, you sit down and have that conversation. Why aren't you doing your work? Well, I didn't really understand it. Okay, it's a training failure. You got to bring it back to training. Well, I'm not doing it because I really don't like my boss. Well, that's not a reason, but we can work on that. Why don't you like your boss? So you start sitting down and finding what the problem is. The other one is like, hey, I don't like my job. I said, oh, okay, well, we can deal with that. We just have to show you the door and stuff. Why don't you like the job? And you may find out it's not a good fit for the company, or you find out that boss who you think is doing a great job is a very toxic leader. When we say toxic leader, those are the ones that get things done no matter what the cost to make themselves look good and crush everybody beneath them. The last thing is leaders set the tone, both good and bad. You walk into a room and you have a bad day, guess what? The office is going to have a bad day because you're the boss. Character is paramount. Next slide. Okay, my last slide. So again, and this is where, please, if I generate some questions, but the key off you, as I mentioned, know your strengths and challenges. As a good leader, you self-reflect. When you come in life, and as I got older through ranks, I used to sit back going, was I that young punk lieutenant? Oh, yes, I was. So when I had to counsel my lieutenants, I knew what to think about that. It's being a very empathetic leader, thinking about that. What are the challenges they're facing in life? Because every generation is different. And that's sometimes you find old people like, they're not like my generation. Well, yeah, of course not, because your generation is 35 years ago. So you have to sit back and say, what's motivating those young soldiers? When I say young people, whatever your young people are today, because I sit down and talk to them, hey, what drives you? What gets you to do from point A to point B? It goes into the second one. Know your people, lead by example with integrity, and inspire inclusion and followership. It's the old thing when you, at the table, where you sit is where you stand. And if we're on the table and there's only like a bunch of old guys and all the young kids are on the back, we usually have that in the military. I usually stop and say, hey, what do we think? And I go start with the youngest soldier, the lowest ranking, and go all the way around till I want to hear what my 06s say, because that way, one, they're engaged. And two, I really want to listen to what they have to say. And that way you're empowering them. And also you're teaching them, you're giving them that development. I'm doing that leader development because now they know, for also personal reasons, I want to make sure everyone pays attention, right? So when you go around, they're going to be asked questions. They usually tend to pay attention, plus because they feel part of it. Competence, commitment, and character. So this one is very important. You can have very committed people. You can have super competent people, but if they lack character, Those are the people who will get the job done and break all the rules to do it. And they don't care. The toxic leaders, there's very, very limited times you ever want those people in your organization, unless you call them gunslingers. I need to go in there and fire half the plant. And then the first thing you do is you fire that guy, the gunslingers. Very bad. But again, that's a business practice, but if you don't have people with character, that's had that bad apple that can just spread cancer throughout the organization. And some people have it, no matter what you try to do to change them, because you can't change the person, you're changing their behavior. Taking care of the people, forcing the stands, we talked about that. As I said, stay calm, remain objective, never decide in anger, and be fair and consistent in praise and punishment. That's a hard thing to do sometimes, especially when you're upset, having bad things. Take a deep breath, relax, and sit down. What's going on? And the last one is have fun. And if you're not having fun, ask why. Because that's usually a good indication. Hey, why aren't you having fun? This should be a good event. We have a great team. Why aren't you having fun? And you may find they have family pressures, they may have financial pressures, they may not like their job, they may not like the boss. But again, it's all about dialogue. Okay, sit down, talk to your people, know your people, and then engage them and have fun. So that is my last slide. Hopefully I did it in decent enough time to take any questions. And any questions whatsoever? You let me off without a question? Oh, wow, look at that.
Wow.
I was thinking about this, the follow-up. How many small business owners or people are in the room?
Huh?
Quite a few. That's what I thought. So I think maybe the first consideration, John, is if in your organizations that you have any issues or any questions, think of John as a consultant here and introduce your problems or whatever, in a generic way. And let's see if he can answer your questions. So let's start with that as first.
Anyone?
Yeah.
John, in your relationships, how do you relate to people when they're doing international trade, when they're working with different diversity of cultures?
Yeah, so you have multiple forms of leadership. You have cultural leadership, you have gender leadership. So when you talk about cultures, they have the GLOBE study, the global leadership, observation, behavior, something, and you can generalize different cultures. So the key is to understand that culture. What works. You understand Japanese businessmen. They will sit there and drink and dine for about 4 hours before they're finally getting around to ask that thing. So when you deal with international people, how do you relate to them? Find out, do you have anything in common? So the one thing I would tell everyone, if you were to deal with any type of international business, talk family. Talk, everyone's a mom and dad. Everyone has family. You try to build that rapport, but also understand of what's go and no go. So I think it comes back to building that rapport. And then, like everybody else, no matter, even if you travel the world. My wife and I are very extensive travelers who've been to all 7 continents. Body language. You want, people can tell if you, or, hey, that's interesting. That's, you're nodding your head. So again, it comes back to that, but also having somebody who's watching you. So the good thing about it, as a general, I had an aide who always watched me and say, hey, sir, I said, if I'm doing anything that it could be inconsequential, you don't think about it. Like I look at my watch when someone's talking, that just tells me I just respected them and stuff, because I don't care about their time. So that's how I would say dealing with people with international stuff. And also, like, I'm going to China. My wife and I have been to China again. Well, I know I have a wealth of people now I can call, and because I know just like the States aren't homogeneous, neither is Northern China, Beijing, or Shanghai, or Xi'an out there out west, because everybody has different. Did I say that right, Joe? Xi'an?
Yes,
Okay, just Dway. But yeah, I did take Chinese for 2 years and I'm very bad at it, but I'm trying to relearn it again. But again, understanding people's culture and also reading their body language. And then don't be afraid to ask questions. The one thing the reason I did so well, I'll be the first person. I don't know. I always joke, if you find yourself to be the smartest person in the room, you're probably in the wrong room, so.
Anyone? Okay. John, I have
Sure.
I have 2 questions, actually. One is easier, one is not easier. Thank you very much for this wonderful, I think smart and wise, comment through us. I have a first question that to me, I understand is that you have a still achievement in the military, you are the general. To me, is that people can graduate from the military school, such as West Point, so they can easily go up and up because that's the school or college can give you the education. But I read in your bio, you graduated from here, Northeastern. So how you connect you from the education you got here and benefit from you to you and go up to that point to say, I have the same achievement from the school education. I can achieve the same one with the people who graduate from West Point.
Sure. So let me take you back to 2014 or 2016. I was a senior colonel at the time. We had a chief of staff job, and that is the pinnacle of the full-time force in the Massachusetts National Guard, being the chief of staff, not a general, but as a chief of staff, you drive everything, you own the force. And with that, I didn't get selected. Now, if you look at it, I should have been, but it is what it is. I didn't get selected. Thank you there. And someone came to me and said, hey, aren't you worried about your legacy? And I looked them square in the eye and said, my legacy has been defined by 26 years of service prior to this. The job doesn't make the person. So I think with that understanding and also humility, whoever the chief of staff was a female friend of mine. I've known her for 20 years. I said, Christine, I will support you and you'll be very successful. You never have to worry about that because doing that, it's all about the organization. Sometimes you don't get the job you want, but if you're a team player, you want the organization to succeed. And I think that's one of them. And the reason I did that is just dealing with people all through my education. I have a very broad background. I ran our recruiting command for 38 months, and not to brag, but we did win 9 national awards. I ran an infantry battalion coming back from Afghanistan. I ran our schoolhouse. I ran a school down in our military academy. I ran our director of personnel. So I had a very broad background. And then when the general was looking for people to fill the vacancy, he picked me and he looked at me and he goes, you know why I picked you, John? I'm like, no, sir, I don't. He goes, people like you and I can trust you. And it really resonated at that point going, wow. And he goes, you don't understand, sir. A lot of people come up and goes, the IG came to me because when you become general, they all investigate you, to make sure you don't have any skeletons in your past. And he goes, sir, I've never seen anybody nobody had a bad word to say about you. Nobody. Wow. And it was a humbling experience because I just live my values. I treat people with dignity and respect. I really enjoy people, but also I think that's why you can get things done because you inspire people. And I think it's just, that's the easy one. So what's the hard one there?
Yeah, that's a very good example. Thank you very much to encourage everyone, not from only the school, but every school, you graduate with heart and with knowledge, with passion. And so you can achieve the same level as other people's, definitely.
And also good coaching.
Good coaching, yeah.
Good coaching, good bosses. So again, as a leader, you know your people. You just like if you're a parent, your son or daughter's potential. And nothing's worse when you see potential just go to waste. And you want to sit there and you kick them from one end to the other to get them over that goal line. And at the end, they realize, wow, I didn't think I could do it. I'm like, well, I knew you could do it. You just had to convince yourself that you could do it and stuff.
So the second one to me is a little bit difficult because I got this question from my professor in my graduate school in Canada. And he also said every time, hey, so smart people try to fix problems or issues, but wise people, they try to avoid issues. So in the battleground or whatever at the end of the day, now I still face the same problem every time when I make a decision. If I'm a smart, I'm with the wise people, because sometimes you do make the mistake. You have to fix it. But why you have to say, hey, I learned this first time. Next time, I want to avoid the problem rather than fix. So in your experience, how do you explain this kind of things that you try to learn from the lesson? You have so many lessons to learn, but next time, I think you try to be a smart or wise people, right? So how do you deal with this question day by day in the battlefield or whatever hard decision you're going to make? So first time you make a mistake, and then next time you're going to avoid that one for sure. I think. How do you explain in your experience to say balanced out the, try to be smart or try to be wise or try to be both? So how do you, put that?
So the easy answer is as military officers, we don't run away from problems. We engage problems. The key is when you engage problems, you find out, you try to go down to what is the root cause. A lot of people treat the symptoms, but they don't treat the cause. And you go down and it's all about somewhere along the line, somebody didn't understand something, thought they were smarter than somebody, or undermining the boss. And if you really pull that back, you find it's all emotion. You know, when you have those difficult problems, and because if you have mistakes, people make mistakes. Do you own it? Do you learn from it and move on? And I think that's the one, because when you avoid problems, they're not going to go away. And that's the thing. I think good leaders seek out problems, but not so much seek them out. They walk around going, hey, how you doing today? Everything good? Well, you know, sir, hey, you know, my copy machine's jammed. Oh, okay, I'll take care of that. You go back to your office, pick up the phone. Hey, how come you're not fixing it? Well, I really don't like her. I don't care if you like her or love her. That copy machine is broke. You need to fix that. And then all of a sudden, like, wow, they actually do what they said they're going to do. We have a saying in the military, when soldiers stop bringing you problems, you failed as a leader, because we fix problems. And if we can't fix it, we got to figure out how to do it. And the one thing I told when I ran my personnel section, I told all my guys, you all can't say no. I can say no. If someone calls you and asks you something that you can't do, you tell them why you can't do it. Because no is the most gutless, thoughtless, easiest answer anyone can give, because you don't have to think about it. No. Well, tell me why can't you do it? And I always said, if you can't do something, tell them what you can do. It's like when they ask, I can't do that, Joe, but here's what I can do. Or, hey, Joe, what do you want to accomplish? I want to do this. Oh, I can help you with that. So again, it's how it's engaging in dealing with problems. Because if you avoid problems, they ain't going to go away. And they'll fester and they get bigger and bigger, and then it affects other people. And that's, I think that's the, you know, it's also know when to pick your battles. You know, the other thing too is like, yeah, that is something that's I won't say beneath me or below me, but you don't want to get involved in that, because you're going to get stuck on a swamp. But that's what you pay those younger lieutenants to go, hey, fix this. Well, sir, I'm like, listen, if I have to do your job, then I don't need you. So, you know, be very careful the day I have to come and start doing your job, because that means you're not doing it. So again, find out why they do it. So
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
John, I think you and I decided that you were going to be the good guy,
okay, you gonna lay them all out now?
and you're going to tell people all the good stuff in a place like the Army, where there are rules, there are regulations, and you have to follow them, right? I happen to have a child who is a vet from the Air Force, believe it or not. I didn't even know when she joined the Air Force, but she is. And she said, well, Mom, it's easy in the Army because you have a lexicon. You have a big fat book which tells you all the terms that you use. And it's not the normal language. And I said, really? Well, how do they manage when they leave? Do they carry that lexicon outside? Well, I'm a sociolinguist, so I'm worried about language and culture. And if you have to leave the Army, which you do sometimes before you retire, how do you function in the real world? Now, to tell you a little bit about me, I brought what Ancestry.com told me a couple of days ago, because my same daughter decided she needed to know all about who I am. I come from Guyana. Anybody knows where Guyana is? Good. Some people do. Now we're important. Now we're important. When I was about 4 years old, my neighbor was working in Venezuela in the oil fields. Trinidad has oil. 70 years later, we find oil. It's been there all the time. But nobody bothered with us, or we didn't want them to bother with us. Not we, the British, okay? When you look at me, I don't know what you think I am, but let me tell you what Ancestry.com says. From Southern India, I'm 21%. From Benin and Togo, 20%. From Ivory Coast and Ghana, 15%. From Nigeria, 14%. From Scotland, 14%. From Northern India, 4%. From Senegal, 3%. From Cameroon, Congo, and Western Bantu peoples, 3%. From Mali, 2%. Sweden and Denmark, 2%. England, Northwestern Europe, 1%, Ireland, 1%. That's my country. We've been described as the whole world in one country. And I say that not to say something about me, but to say something about the real world. When you see somebody, you really don't know who they are. And when they speak, you may still not know who they are. I speak to you in English, and Gloria can tell you, I taught English for 22 years at Harvard. But before that, I taught all over the world. And my children are German, for example. And if we have to work out there in the real world, where there are not as quite clear rules and regulations and training for it, we have to collaborate, but we have to find out who we're collaborating with and how to do it properly. Now, again, John gave you the good guy look. Last week, I was listening to Ari Melber on MSNBC, and he had this young woman on, very pretty, and she was talking about her book. The book is called The Playbook: How to Deny Science, Sell Lies, and Make a Killing in the Corporate World. She has evidence. All of this is evidence of people who have done this. And it's a New York Times bestseller. And the back says, if you just look at the front, you may not look at the back, but the back is the important part. If you want to be a vile, greedy capitalist, this how-to book will be a great help. And if you want to identify vile, greedy capitalists, it will show you how to recognize them, a landmark book. I don't want to be accused of selling the book, but I just want to bring to your attention that people, the same people who go without the character, without the integrity, are out there. And they might be in there in your organization as well. And since we have to collaborate, we need to be very much on the qui-vive to know exactly who we're dealing with. And that first appearances may be very, very wrong. I was telling John also when I went to work in the Middle East, I went to work for the Ford Foundation. I was young, this was in the 70s. And I had a lot of languages before, but they sent me to Berkeley for a summer to learn intensive Arabic. And I learned it, and I came to Cairo, and I got to a taxi, and I called the guy with my hand, and I said, Al-Jamit al-Merki fil Qahira min fadlak. And the guy takes me in his car, and he drives until he thinks he knows where I might be wanting to go. This is a long time ago, it was safe. And he stops in Tahrir Square, which is like the most important big city square at the time. And he sees a young woman, and he motions to her, and he says, Kalam Inglesi, do you speak English? And she said, yes. And he pointed to me, asking her to tell me where I wanted to go. And so she in English says to me, where do you want to go? And I said, American University in Cairo. And she said to him, Jamaica. And there I had gone in my long, fluent, Arabic statement, which the man didn't understand. But again, he collaborated with me, with her, and I was right around the corner for where I needed to go. And we have to give each other that space, because first impressions may be wrong, maybe totally off. And I can tell you stories, but I want to tell you what my best boss ever. I am in my high 70s right now, and I was very young back then. And I walk into this office, and this guy is coming. We used to call him 360 afterwards. The IBM 360 was the big thing back then. And he says, you must be Lilith. And I said, yes. He says his name. He says, I'm your superior. And I said, in more ways than one. And he said, no, I just mean I was here earlier than you. Because in French, which he spoke as a native language, superior means I got here before you. And he says, I'm going away for a few weeks, and I'll read all the files. And when I come back, we'll talk. And that was my first lesson in working in administration. read the files. Okay, nobody ever told me to do that, but that was the lesson I took from him. And then when he came back to work and I went in to see him, he said, no, I am de jure in charge of this program. You are de facto in charge of this program. I am here to support you. I have worked for countless people since then. Nobody has ever been that. That man has been my best boss ever. Today he's 90 years old and I have never missed a Christmas card from him. He's sitting in Belgium and he finally agreed to use email. So it's okay. But the things that you learn, you do sometimes just by paying attention. And it may not be explicit, but you have to keep your ears open. And the messy world does exist, but we have to collaborate. And so, John, I hope I didn't upset the Army. I know I didn't mean to. I didn't mean to, but I just wanted to throw that out there because I'm a sociolinguist and they never teach sociology in school. They teach you language, but they don't tell you how it works in society. Okay, so if you have questions for John or me, we're happy to take them.
Amazing lectures. Thank you again. I have a question for General John. In the Army leadership and compare with leadership in education, leadership in business, leadership in society is quite different because it's a control and command. And in the leadership world, it's a lot of things, many factors. A lot of times it's about the balance. I think for me, I'm very curious, like in the Army leadership, I think which is the highest form of leadership about control and command. How do you balance, control and command with factors like entrepreneurship inside such organized structures? I think a lot of people possibly do very well if you give them space. You say, this is the job, get it done. But in military leadership, I think the core of the leadership is you get a job done no matter what, control and command. In the course I learned in Kennedy School, my professor, Tony Ottinger, always say it's about how you command. It's like commanders, like when I go to Asia, I see commanders. How do the commanders balance leadership, entrepreneurship, and other uncertainty factors? How do you balance the art of the leadership?
So it really comes down to knowing your people. And as Luther was talking there, and when you work for somebody that you respect and you let that person down, it's just heart-wrenching. Nothing, the best counseling to get anybody's attention, whether it's in the military or not, is you look at square in the eye and going, you disappointed me. And if that person is a professional, that will cut their heart out. And I think that comes back to, how to, so your people. So how do you balance that? So you look at the system overall. We didn't talk about systems because it's a big thing, but when you talk about leadership and systems, because you have to get people beyond themselves, because there's a reason why pride is the first deadly sin, because people think of themselves, and it's natural. You want to think of yourself, your family, your security. But when you believe into something that's bigger than yourself, the New England Patriots, people want to come to New England because they want to win, not anymore, but they used to, but they believe in that system. So they'll take less money. They really want to believe in that. So in the military, there's a big thing. We have to innovate, The problem with innovation, I'm sure there's a lot of entrepreneurs here. The goal of innovation, if you're going to fail, you fail fast and you fail often. You keep failing until you something that works. The problem with the military, it's a very conservative, very lethargic organization. There's stratas upon stratas of things, and it's dealing with, I'm on a board right now for navigation, non-GPS navigation, and you have some people that believe like, well, we're going too fast. Well, they're concerned because they'll lose their job, as opposed to saying, no, we need to innovate and pick this up. And that's, I think, is, how do you balance it? As a good leader, if it's something slowing down, it goes back to the thing. You don't tell them no. Tell me why they're not. Well, I said no. Why is it? And you realize it's not they're afraid of for themselves and they're afraid of job security. And I think that's sometimes you, as a leader, you got to be very conscious of that when you're dealing with anyone and balancing that pros and cons. And it really comes down to like knowing your people, but also what's the bigger mission? Because you're right. I can make an order and people will do it. My concern as a leader is to make sure, do they believe in the mission? Number one, they think it's achievable. And number two, I'm not wasting their time and resources, even worse, wasting their lives, you know, because as a good leader, you want to make sure you have your folks have a fighting chance. But when it comes to resources and bigger opportunities, you want to make sure, is this the right place? And that's why CEOs, you know, people complain about CEOs because they get a lot of money. Well, sometimes they get a lot of money is because they have people depending on them, their livelihoods. You know, good CEOs, when we talk about good capitalists, if they're good, they care about their workers because it's about their families. You know, I don't want to make a wrong decision. So sometimes they're very conscientious about changing because they don't want to make the wrong move and cost the company. You know, and that's the other thing too is, but where's the balance? Where's the risk versus reward? Good leaders self-reflect. They have a team. They bring everybody in the room, no matter from the secretary, executive assistant, all the way up and say, hey, where do we need to go forward? How do we need to do this? And be open to ideas. Because as a boss, nothing's worse than being called out, but it's good if they do it the right way and saying, you know what? I didn't think about that. That's, hey, can you help me with that? And now what did you just do? You just motivated that young soldier, the young individual to think, wow, I can't believe the general wants this. I'm like, guys, you're the future. And I keep telling them, you're the future. I'm old, man. My career is down to one hand right now. You have, you know, 30 some odd years in front of you. You try to get them to see the big picture. And I think that's when it comes down, how do you balance that? So sorry for the long answer. Hopefully I hit that, answer the question for you there.
I know the time is limited, but I want to ask one more question.
It's your day, Gloria. You're like the bride, so you fire away. You know?
General, when we grow up, we always admire the stories. People can have such a success from a soldier all the way to the journal. But in the real life, you're the first person I see really lead the army, graduate from schools, non-military, but the career path is such a success. I want to know a lot of factors lead to the success from soldier to the journal. But in your case, if you have some guidance and reflections, what are they? What's the most important factors for your success stories as a leader?
Empathy and humility. Being empathetic, understanding when you talk to somebody, they're a person, and humility, be the first one to admit, hey, I was wrong. And that's the key. If you have people who believe in you, they want you to succeed. I always joke that, you could be dumb as a box of rocks as a commander, but if you take care of your soldiers and they know you're taking care of them, they will carry you. Now, they're not going to carry you to general, but they'll carry you through the company command. I think empathy and just empathy and humility. Those are the two things, but also simple things in life. Do what you're going to say. Do what you do, do what you're going to say, and then say what you're going to do, and then do what you say. It sounds simple, never lie, steal, or cheat, always integrity, those simple things in life, just like mom and dad taught you. It isn't hard. Leadership is easy, if you get the right person in charge, but also teaching them the right way. Those greedy capitalists, they have no character. Their moral compass is off, and no matter how, you have those greedy capitalists, but at the end of the day, when I retired, gave a speech. 4 things really mattered in my life: faith, family, friends, and health. Money's not there. Money's important. I get it, because you have to provide for your family. But at the end of the day, there's no such thing as a trailer hitch on a hearse, and you want to be surrounded by and remembered by loved ones and family. And that's what it really comes down to, and then taking care of people. So.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you so much, Jen. And we're so benefit from your topic. And everyone, and we're going to have another topic right after. We're going to have right away. Okay. All right.